state that were uniting to declare themselves independent from the King of England. We, the people, carefully declared that we were objecting to the tyrannical government of King George of Great Britain that he had set up here in America. You can find the following in the second paragraph of the Declaration. We, the people, wrote, "The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states." To understand what that means, we must next define the word tyranny. Webster's 1828 dictionary, issued only 52 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed, defined the word thusly: tyranny, despotic exercise of power, absolute monarchy, or absolute power. The dictionary also defined the word despot, a word we don't use too often in today's language. It said that the word despot was a king, and I believe it meant any governmental authority, because most of the governments in 1828 were being led by kings, so that was the typical government at the time. So we're saying that a despot was any government invested with absolute ruling or absolute power, or ruling without any control from men, constitution, or laws. So it is fair to conclude that the Founding Fathers felt that King George was creating a tyranny and all-powerful government in America, and that was the reason they were breaking from the monarchy. To further show that the Founding Fathers knew what the word tyranny meant, we can examine the Federalist Papers written in 1787 by John Jay on the left, James Madison in the center, and Alexander Hamilton on the right. Hamilton and Madison actually signed the Constitution, which meant that they must have approved of whatever it contained. James Madison defined the word tyranny in Federalist Papers number 47. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. Madison later defined it again when he talked about a tyrannical concentration of all the same power of government in the same hands. He later quoted Montesquieu, a political writer in the mid-17th century, who wrote this: "There can be no liberty where the legislative and executive powers are united in the same body of magistrates." Then the writers of the Declaration listed 28 specific evidences that King George was guilty of creating an oppressive government, a tyranny in the United States. The 22nd of those reads, "He," meaning King George, "has given his assent to the suspending of our own legislatures and declaring themselves with power to," please remember this next phrase, they declared themselves with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. Please remember that phrase. The king was taking all power in one body, the legislature, the very definition of tyranny. Our Founding Fathers knew what tyranny was, and that King George was guilty of creating a tyrannical government by replacing America's legislatures. Now the Constitution was issued in 1787, 11 years later. This is from the preamble. "We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." Notice that they were claiming to be creating a government of the United States of America. The Constitution creates three branches of government because the Founding Fathers knew that to give all power to one branch of government was the very definition of tyranny. Our Founding Fathers created the legislative branch of government in Article 1, the executive branch of government in Article 2, and the judicial branch of government in Article 3. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution grants 18 specific powers to Congress, such as the power to collect taxes, the power to coin money, the power to establish post offices, and the power to declare war, amongst others. But in amongst those grants of power, they placed the cancer cell, the one they knew would destroy the very republic they were creating. This is what they wrote. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Congress shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. Notice that we've read that phrase somewhere else. We have just read that same phrase in the Declaration of Independence. When they used that phrase in the Declaration, they were defining the word tyranny. But when they used the same phrase in the Constitution, they were giving powers to Congress. The power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. It is impossible not to conclude that the Founding Fathers gave Congress tyrannical powers. They did so in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Remember that the Founding Fathers accused King George of creating a tyranny by declaring themselves with the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. They granted Congress the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. They used the same words. They knew what they were doing because they wrote the Constitution only 11 years after they wrote the Declaration of Independence. Notice one more thing. This all-powerful, all-tyrannical government that our Founding Fathers created was limited to just one place only. The Founding Fathers continued Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Congress shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, of course they're meaning here Washington, D.C., as may become the seat of the government of the United States. So the Founding Fathers were giving this tyrannical power to Congress in just one place, Washington, D.C. It is interesting when you remember that the residents of Washington, D.C. today do not elect a congressman, and they've never elected a congressman. They do not elect a senator today, and they've never elected a senator. The people who live in Washington, D.C. are being taxed without representation. They have no representatives in Congress to represent them as Congress passes laws. Their affairs are being handled by Congress, and this is called, quite simply, taxation without representation. That was supposedly the reason that the American people dissolved the Union with Great Britain. This was supposedly the issue in the American Revolution. The American people were breaking with the English government because they were being taxed without having any representation in how that money was collected or utilized. But our Founding Fathers set up a government that could tax the citizens in Washington, D.C. without any representation. This is very strange indeed. This limited grant of power is limited to only one part of America. These congressmen have this power, this tyrannical power, only in Washington, D.C. So what that means is that Congress has tyrannical powers to run Washington, D.C. When Congress interferes in the remainder of America, meaning the 50 states, it operates on Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 16, 18 in the Bill of Rights. Those powers are very specific. It is limited to very specific powers, all spelled out in great detail by the Founding Fathers. And the 10th Amendment further restricts the power of the government of the United States of America. It reads, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." It becomes important to notice that we patriots who thought that the 10th Amendment limited the powers of the federal government have been fooled once again. I always believed that this 10th Amendment restricted Congress, but notice that it says that if we didn't give the power to the United States, they don't have it. And I, along with most American patriots, felt that we were being protected by the 10th Amendment. But what they are saying is if we didn't give the power to the government of the United States, the power stays with the people or with the states. But our Founding Fathers gave all power to the government of the United States, and the people can have all that is left. But there is no power left if you give all power to the government of the United States. So there is no question, and I know this is very hard to believe, our Founding Fathers were traitors and liars. Our Founding Fathers deserve only the worst condemnations possible. Our Founding Fathers deserve to be ranked with the worst scoundrels of all time. So the Founding Fathers gave Congress unlimited power to run Washington, D.C. Notice that they wrote the Constitution for the United States of America. But when they created the government in Washington, D.C., they called it the government of the United States. They were creating two separate constitutional governments in America. One is called the government of the United States, which administers Washington, D.C. with tyrannical powers, And the second is called the Government of the United States of America, which administers the constitutional powers over the 50 states. It is called a limited republic with specified powers. There was not much concern with this tyrannical power in the government of the United States until the 14th Amendment was passed in 1868 after the Civil War. The 14th Amendment reads in part, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Also notice that there are two ways to become a citizen of the United States. The amendment says that you can be born inside Washington, D.C., or you can become a naturalized citizen. A naturalized citizen is one who voluntarily asks to become an American, because when you do, you become subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So we, the people of the United States of America, are now citizens of the United States. If you were not born in Washington, D.C., you are a naturalized citizen. Now, how did we become a naturalized citizen when we declared ourselves to be the people of the United States of America? And here's the answer. We voluntarily accepted a Social Security card issued by the government of the United States. When we accepted our Social Security card, we voluntarily gave up our sovereignty to the government of the United States. And when we did that, we voluntarily gave jurisdiction over us to that government that has tyrannical power. Now, we thought we had to obtain a Social Security card, and we did so because we allowed ourselves to be tricked into believing we had to get a Social Security card. I want you to know there is no law requiring any of us to get a Social Security card. We get one because we think we have to. We are not required to do so. And patriots are now asking the Social Security Administration to remove their number from the files with some degree of success. This is a letter showing that the tax is voluntary. It was written by the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. That means that they know that the tax is voluntary. That means that they are guilty of deception. And it is also important to point out that income taxes are voluntary. Income taxes are not law required. They're not mandatory. I am a self-employed writer and publisher, and I pay an estimated tax each quarter, and to do so I use this form called the 1040-ES. The paragraph in the top middle, underlined in blue, reads as follows. Who must make estimated tax payments? Notice what it says. These rules, these laws, no, it says these rules apply to U.S. citizens. Notice that the IRS says that these are rules, not laws, and that these rules apply only to U.S. citizens. Only U.S. citizens must pay the tax. So if you are neither a naturalized U.S. citizen nor born in Washington, D.C., it appears as if you do not have to pay a tax under these rules. I am not saying that you must not pay taxes. I am saying that it appears as if these rules only apply to persons born in Washington, D.C., or to naturalized citizens who have voluntarily given the government in Washington, D.C. jurisdiction over their person. Let me provide you with one more evidence that there are two governments in the United States. As far as preliminary research indicates, the post office cannot charge more than 2 cents per half ounce for mail sent between any two states in the United States of America. Any shipment of a piece of mail between any two states is called non-domestic mail, and the United States government apparently has no jurisdiction over anything more than that. This is a letter sent to me from Florida. Notice that the envelope bearing the 2-cent stamp used to pay the postage for it was not marked "Return for postage." It went through. Notice that the wording that the sender put on the letter under the stamp. The letter went through without postage due. And this is the wording that the sender used to get the mail through for 2 cents. The non-domestic letter rate of 2 cents per half ounce is established by congressional law, 12 statutes at large, Chapter 71, Section 23. Any other rate constitutes a criminal violation of USC, stands for United States Code 1728. So what I am saying is that someone in the U.S. Postal Service knows that there are two governments in the United States. There's one more evidence that we are right. The draft of civilian